Okay, so housekeeping basics that I like to stick to. Give yourself a name. So like I notice on here, we've got somebody that's labeled as Samsung SM whatever. There's a, if you hover over your box or whatever, there's the 3 buttons and you can go on and change your name so that we know who we're talking to if you have any questions. So that would be helpful. Everybody else looks like they're pretty good with name labels, except we have one that's a phone number as well. So fiddle around with it and see if you can change your name. That would be much appreciated. We also, in your little toolbar, generally at the bottom of the screen or the top, there's a chat. If everybody's talking and we've got a good conversation going and you want to interject, there's a couple things you can do. There's a raise your hand function. There's also the chat box, and we'll have people monitoring the chat box to, make sure we keep track of questions as they come in so that we can make sure we answer everyone's questions. And then of course, if you'd like to, speak and have the floor, you can raise your hand and I will see that on my screen and be able to call on anybody that wants to speak. And then please, if you are not talking, mute yourself so that we don't have a lot of background. Minimize that. That's a great example right there. So anybody that is not currently muted, please try to do so that we minimize that kind of background noise. Appreciate it. Okay, so this is just the format and progression. We've done part 1. That was with Andy Doak, and Andy broke out all the areas of the test and just kind of talked through the overview of the test. Did a great job on part 1. And then part 2, we had Larry Stone discussing duck search. That was in November. Tonight we have Herb Christian with us discussing field work and steadiness. And then in March, we'll have Roy Ames talking to us about healing and steadiness at the blind and those parts of the test. So that's just our format for those of you that are interested in what's coming in the future. We also have these recorded. They will be on our YouTube channel. I sent out a link to our YouTube channel in the newsletter, but I'm not, if anybody tried to use that link and it didn't work, please let me know, because I sent it to somebody today and they said it didn't work. So we need to figure out how to make that accessible so that those of you that want to listen to part 1 and 2 or any parts of this to refer back to that, so that you can do that, because we do have those available on our YouTube channel. So with that, I'd like to welcome Herb. He's a member of the Buckeye chapter in NAVHDA. He's a senior judge and an invitational judge. Herb, feel free to add any accolades to that you wish to. And I will turn it over to you and kind of let you have the floor. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alicia. Again, as Alicia said, my name is Herb Christian. A little bit about me. Professionally, I work for UPS. Been doing that for 34 years as a health and safety professional. In my spare time, I love versatile hunting dogs. I've been involved in NAVHDA for 15 years. First bird dog I got, I bought a hunting dog and got introduced through my breeder and a close friend who had been involved in NAVHDA. Went to my first training day and I was hooked. From there on, I think I am on my 4th German short-haired pointer and a Bracco Italiano. I've ran all levels of NAVHDA testing. I've passed and failed. Failing is part of it. And don't look at failing a test as a downfall or a fault. Look at it as a learning experience. And that's something that you have to do, because you then go back and take those shortcomings, and that's where you need to improve yourself and improve your dog with additional training. So with that, I appreciate the invitation to be here this evening. To talk to the folks here at Napa. I will give you my best. Sometimes you go through this and you'll hear different methods to correct different problems from different trainers. I am not a professional trainer. I've never done anything professionally in regards to the training world of versatile hunting dogs. But there's one thing I am proud to say. Every dog that I have ran in a NAVHDA test, every dog that I have owned has been self-trained by myself and my NAVHDA chapter and NAVHDA family. And I strongly recommend that you get involved in a NAVHDA chapter and utilize the Ames book and give it your best shot, because it makes a stronger bond between you and your canine companion. So with that, we'll go ahead and move into the discussion. So Alicia, if you got a next slide, go ahead and we'll see where we're at.
If you want me to jump around to other areas, just let me know and I can scroll through until we get to whatever you need me to.
We'll just follow your slides and I'll give you the best I can.
Okay.
If you can't dazzle them with brilliance, you baffle them with BS. Okay. So not knowing, I see some familiar names on our call this evening. I know some of you folks who have ran in tests. There's a couple members of the Buckeye chapter on here. So everybody's got a little different experience with the utility test or NAVHDA in general. So we'll kind of go to the basics, how the test is scored and what you look at on a scorecard before we get into it. So what you're seeing here is a caption that is brought directly out of the Ames book for the utility test. And what this is doing is where it falls under test, the water, field, and judgment. Those are the three sections of the test, excuse me. And then each section is now broken down into what makes up, for example, the water portion, the search for duck, walking in the heel, remaining by blind, steady by blind, and retrieve of duck. And then so forth, moving down the page. The field work the same way. And then the bottom portion where it says judge throughout, nose, desire, stamina, cooperation, and obedience, those are factored into every portion of the test. Okay. Then we move over to where it identifies the index number. So this is, if you're not familiar with the scorecard, this is basically the multiplier. So on a scorecard, a dog can be evaluated or scored from a 0 to 4, for example, in search for duck. The score that the dog receives in the duck search will then be multiplied times that 4. The next columns are maximum points. So the maximum points would be a 16. So if the dog gets a 4 in the duck search, it's multiplied times 4, and that's 16 total points towards the dog's overall score. The next 3 columns identify the minimum prize classification, or the minimum point classification for each level of a prize. For example, in the duck search, the minimum score to get a prize 1 is a 4. And then a 3, and then a 2 for a prize 2 and 3. And that's how this pretty much breaks down. It gives you an idea where you need to score your highest points to get the highest score in the utility test. And as we look at it, there are certain scores that you have to have a maximum of a 4 in those elements. And those are the search for duck, pointing, use of nose, and desire. Okay. So if you're trying to achieve that prize 1, those 4 elements, you have to have a 4 on your scorecard to be in the prize classification for a prize 1. All the other ones all go down to a 3 for a prize 1. And then you can see as it goes down to the prize 2 and the prize 3, you know, what those minimum scores are for that prize classification. Questions on the scoring index chart? I'll open it up before we move to the next slide. Okay. Good. Alicia, next slide. So we see here a difference between the UPT versus the utility test. I will say in my personal experience that if a dog is good enough to receive a prize won in a UPT, most generally that dog is good enough to receive a utility prize. And there are some slight differences between the tests, but generally if a dog is good enough to get a prize 1 UPT, that dog's probably a prize 2 or prize 3 utility dog. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the differences. There's obviously some time differences, and then there's some actual differences in the testing portion itself. So when we look at the duck search on a UPT compared to a utility, a UPT duck search uses a dispatched duck, and it's generally a little closer than a live duck in a utility test. Walking at heel. Walking at heel is done in the UPT test with no obstacles, no gates, no natural curves or bends. Whereas in the utility test, we have gates or we use natural obstacles in the heeling. Steadiness by blind. Steadiness by blind is pretty much the same in both tests. The dog has to remain steady in the blind when the handler goes off to fire the shots. The retrieve of duck, both in the UPT as well as the utility, the dog is expected to retrieve the duck. However, there is a little variance or leniency given that the dog must bring the duck within reach, whereas in the utility test, the dog is expected to deliver to hand. As far as the field group, search, UPT is a 25-minute hunt, where in utility it is a 30-minute hunt. Pointing remains the same in both events. Steadiness on game. So here is probably the biggest difference between the UPT and the utility test. In a UPT test, the dog is expected for a maximum score to remain steady through wing. And in the utility test, the expectation is steady to flush, wing, shot, and fall. Retrieve of shot bird. We still look at the same enthusiasm on the UPT, that the dog goes to the down game, picks it up, and brings it back. In the UPT test, the expectation that it's to be delivered within reach. In a utility test, the expectation is that the dog delivers to hand, and there is a lot of emphasis in recent years being placed on the presentation of the game once the dog has returned to the handler with the game. And what I mean by that is that the dog comes, stops, presents the game to the handler. No longer is what is referred to as a flyby presenting the game to be rewarded with a maximum score. Retrieve by drag. Retrieve by drag, again, a cold dispatch duck. The distances on the UPT is a little shorter compared to the utility. The dog is still expected to retrieve the game. In the UPT, again, a little more lenient on the retrieve as far as the dog has to get it within reach. In the utility test, the game is to be retrieved to hand and presented. Excuse me. As far as the elements judged throughout, the use of nose is equal across the board in both tests. Desire to work is equal, cooperation is equal, obedience is equal. Then the physical attributes is where the judge evaluates the eyes, the teeth, the coat, testes on the dog. The only difference in the UPT and the utility is that in the utility test, we also evaluate and score the stamina of the dog. In hindsight, I can't recall many dogs that have had a stamina issue. I do know I've seen a few over the years. And I think Jeff, George, and Alicia can attest. I'm a big one on conditioning my dogs. I believe a dog that is well conditioned, both physically and mentally, will keep its head in the game better in a utility test or an invitational test. And I am a firm believer of conditioning dogs so that that stamina, that they keep their head in the game. Any questions on this slide as far as the UPT versus the UT test?
I have one, but first I want you, I remember when you ran ice in the invitational, how many miles a day did you run that dog in preparation?
12 miles at 10 miles per hour.
That's crazy. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So the question that I have is regarding presenting game, since you were saying that they kind of changed how that is now. When you say presenting game, are you looking for a dog that just comes and does a swing finish and may or may not, or comes right in front of you? Do they have to lift their head up with the game in their mouth, or can they just come and stand quietly and maybe not lift that head and keep it down? What are you really looking for there?
Very, very good question. We're looking for the dog to come in and stop to where the handler can easily reach down and collect the game.
Okay.
As far as sitting head up, I mean, we don't go to that extreme. If you see it, you reward it on your scorecard, but you know, we're not taking that much into it. Now, to go along with that question though, is the dog maybe having an issue that it may have a little apprehension to give the game to the handler? You know, that's something that could be seen if that continues in the test. Maybe the dog turns its head away as the handler tries to retrieve the game. You know, some of those little things that you may see above and beyond that scenario could factor into a score.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
All right, I think our next one, now I can go straight to the judging scorecard. Oh, look, I did.
Hey, look at that.
Because there's the fieldwork narrative after that, so we can look at the scorecard now.
Okay, so as we look at the scorecard, we'll start with search from duck, and I'll explain the boxes as we work down. So as we look at search for duck, all 5 boxes, the nose, desire, stamina, cooperation, and obedience are all open, clear boxes. What an open, clear box means, and there's a description down at the bottom right-hand corner, that shows that that is a primary score. That score carries a lot of weight as it works down the card. Excuse me. The scorecard works both from left to right and also from top to bottom. So everywhere where there is an open white box is where scores are documented. Okay, so search for duck acquires all 5 elements: nose, desire, stamina, cooperation, and obedience. Those are all primary scores. We come over to the test column. It identifies search for duck, and you see the 4, 3, 2. Those are the minimum prize classifications for prize 1, prize 2, prize 3. So if you get a 1 in search for duck, that is a non-qualifying score, okay? If you get a 2 in search for duck, the maximum score you can get in the utility test would be a prize 3. And then likewise with the 3 and 4. The next column down is score. This box is divided in half. This is for the judge's benefit. Each individual judge, as they do their scorecards and they bring their numbers over from left to right, will put their score in the top left half of that box. As the judge's consensus on their score for that event, then the consensus score goes into the bottom right half of that. That score from the bottom right half, the judge's consensus score, is then multiplied, as we talked about on the index sheet we looked at, by the 4, and that would give you your overall points awarded for the search for duck. Okay. The next 2 going down, walking at heel and remaining by blind. The only thing it's scored in those is obedience. Okay, those are strictly obedience parts of the test. So again, judges' score goes in that column, working across. Judges carry their score over to their side on the score sheet, on the score column. Their consensus multiplied by 2, which is the index. And then that gives you your score for walking at heel. We see the next down where it looks at steady by blind, the checkerboard box. The checkerboard box gets scored where applicable. Okay, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 3 sections on there where you will see that on your scorecard, and that is of the lowest priority when carrying your scores across. So steady by blind, cooperation is given less emphasis compared to obedience on the steady by blind. And then your scores go across the same way. Retrieve of duck, we're seeing all 4 scores in there, where we have a primary, secondary where applicable, and then we have the stamina that's blocked out on the retrieve of duck. So as we look at the retrieve of duck working from left to right, obedience is the primary score, cooperation and desire are secondary, and then the nose box is divided into the checkerboard. Sometimes you may see a nose on a retrieve, other times you may not. If the dog sees the bird hit and goes right to it visually, you're not going to have a nose score for that particular box. So you may be only looking at 3 numbers there to come up with your score for retrieve for duck. Okay. Then we will look at the steadiness sequence: steady to flush, wing, shot, fall, and then steadiness total. Each sequence on the judge's scorecard, which would be on the other side of this scorecard, where the judges take their notes and evaluate each retrieving or each steadiness sequence that the dog encounters. They will then carry their score over to the back side of the scoring sheet. As we can see, working our way down, that the whole top section of these are secondary scores, because as you get to the bottom, you take your steady to flush, wing, shot, and fall to come up with your overall steadiness score in the open white box just to the left where it says steadiness total. Okay, and the steady to flush, wing, shot, and fall, those scores are not carried even further to the right, because you carry it down to steadiness total before it carries over to the overall steadiness score, which will be used to determine the overall score and prize classification for the dog. And then as we work down, you see the others, how they all fall in, but we'll talk about nose, desire, stamina, cooperation, and obedience. This is where we start to carry scores from the top down towards the bottom. So desire to work, nose, we'll start with nose. Nose, for example, you have an opportunity to have a nose score on search for duck, retrieve, search, pointing, retrieve of shot bird. Okay, so if you have no scores, or where you have no scores at the top, you work your way down to come up with your overall nose score. As a judge, you would put your overall nose score in that box, carry it over to the consensus, and then over to or do your judge's score, and then to consensus to determine your overall score. Likewise, for desire, stamina, cooperation, and obedience, you do the same thing. And then that'll carry into the final score for the dog. As we look to the right side of the scorecard, you know, all the top information is the dog and handler information. Then we look at the physical attributes. Physical attributes is evaluated as the dog comes out of the water on the retrieve of duck. Judges will evaluate the eyes, male dog's testes. They will ask you if your dog has been hip x-rayed and if the x-rays are on file. Then they will evaluate the bite and teeth, the coat, and then the temperament. Okay. So that pretty much takes us through the scorecard. Any questions on the scorecard?
I have one.
Yes, sir, Jeff.
At steadiness by blind, for instance, you've got a score for cooperation and a score for obedience. Sometimes I don't understand the difference between the two. What do you look at and how do you separate the two?
So on steady by blind, looking at the difference between cooperation and obedience. So let me look here. On steady by blind, cooperation is you get the dog down and, you know, it's one command, the dog's down. Obedience is, you know, is the dog staying? Is the dog up and moving? And obedience is the primary score in that element. That answer your question there, Jeff?
I hate to say no, but I'm sure it's just overall, not necessarily in steadiness by blind, but overall cooperation and obedience. There's got to be a difference at looking at.
And that's a good one because they kind of go hand in hand in times. Do you have to give the dog additional commands, and is the dog obeying them? So cooperation is when the dog gets a command and obeys it. So least amount of commands required, falling under obedience. And then when you do give a command, you know, is the dog cooperating with the handler to work as a team in following those commands?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question similar along those lines.
Okay.
So say you go into, you know, your dog goes on the first point in the field portion and you can tell like the dog's fixing to either inch forward or break on you. You give the whoa command, they whoa, but it was just on that first bird contact of, you know, the field portion. Is that going to dock you on your
So you're giving
steadiness?
The dog's already established point, and you're giving the word, and we're assuming the dog is aware of you as the handler moving in. So now we're looking at steady to flush. You give a whoa command that takes your steady to flush from a 4 to a 3 as long as the dog stops and no additional commands are required on steady to flush for that sequence.
So if, you know, say worst case scenario, dog was having an off day and you gave one whoa command at every bird contact in the field, but the dog obeyed it and everything else went smooth, would that be considered a 3 on steadiness?
So again, you could, and let me give you an example here. So the dog establishes point, the dog is aware of the handler. As you're walking into the dog to flush the bird, you give a whoa, the dog obeys. My scorecard would read a 3 for steady to flush. You go in, the bird takes wing. You give a whoa, the dog obeys the command. That would give my scorecard a 3 for steady to wing. The gunshot report goes off. You give a whoa, the dog obeys. That's a 3 in steady to shot. The bird hits the ground, you give an additional whoa. That is a 3 in steadiness to fall. So your overall steadiness score for that bird contact would be a 3. Now, remember, that's that the dog is obeying and not moving on that command.
That makes sense, having it broke down like that, because obviously it doesn't matter if it's whoa or heel, or if you give them a command and utility, especially if they don't obey the command, you're fixing to get docked.
Exactly. You know, we are looking at a utility dog as a finished gun dog. Okay. So the least amount of commands you give, the better off you are. But there are places you can give commands when needed. But my mentor, who was here earlier with me, Jeff Rhodes, taught me a long time ago, if you give a command, give it once and mean it. You know, whether you give a whisper command or you give a hard whoa that stops everybody in their tracks, it has the same effect on your scorecard.
He touched on that at our event this, past summer. He was, do you give 4 soft woes, or do you give them 1 hard woe? You give them 1 hard woe.
Right. Right, because if you're given 4 soft woes on the steady to flush, you're going to be lucky to get a 1. So, break it down to each individual aspect. Use your commands when you need to. If you don't need to give a command, don't give it. And that comes with knowing your dog. Okay. Knowing where to give those commands. But very good question, Brady. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Additional questions on the scorecard? And I will tell you this, that scorecard is very intimidating if and when you ever become an apprentice, the first time you get out there, to put it all together. But you get a few under your belt, and they actually flow pretty good. They'll flow pretty good. I know I see Andy Dokes on here with us tonight. I know myself, and Andy will probably testify to it. First couple of dogs you judge as an apprentice judge, and you got this utility card out. Excuse me. It can be pretty intimidating. You got to make sure you get your scores in the right columns or right boxes, and work it from left to right and then top to bottom. So, okay, some good questions. No other questions. We'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so talk about field work here, and I'm not going to go through and read this. This is all what's out there in the aims and rules book, but the field work, we're looking for a 30-minute hunt. Dog needs to be able to search, find game, point game. Dog needs to, from that point, be steady to flush, wing, shot, and fall, and retrieve birds to hand. A whole lot goes into that. A lot of training. And, you know, most of the dogs we see come out generally have a pretty good search. There's not a whole lot of issues that we see with search, other than, you know, two things that I can say happen, and they're on each end of the spectrum, is number one, a dog that will not go to objectives and works close to the handler. And then I've also seen some times where you had a dog that was 300-400 yards out from the handler, and you know, field trial, that's kind of what you look for. But in NAVHDA, we're kind of looking at, you know, the dog and handler work as a team. Not saying that we haven't had some big running dogs who have earned prize ones, but you know, that expectation is when that dog gets out there, that the handler knows where the dog's at. And if the dog goes on point, and if it takes you 3, 4, 5 minutes to walk to that dog still needs to be standing there on point. And the handler has to be able to produce game when that happens. So again, search, 30-minute hunt in the field. Dog needs to search the cover, search objectives, produce game, and work as a team with the handler. Then we move into, excuse me one second. Then we move into the steadiness, which is kind of depicted here. Steadiness is broken into 4 categories. Oh, let me go to pointing first, because the dog goes on point. When does pointing end and steady to flush begin? Pointing ends when the dog is aware of the handler. As the handler's walking in, sometimes you'll see a dog kind of cock their head or give a little acknowledgement as the handler's working in. And as a judge, that's when I see we move from pointing to our steadiness score. Steady to flush is when the handler walks past the dog's aware of the handler who is walking in to flush the bird. Sometimes that bird's 2, 3, 4, 5 feet in front of the dog. Sometimes that may be a 20, 30, 40 foot distance. Bird may have gotten up to move. The dog may have caught scent from a distance, wind change, whatever, and the dog's got some distance on that game that's on the ground. Steady to flush. Steady to wing is when the bird takes wing. So we move from the steady to flush score to steady to wing. Steady to wing is when the bird takes flight. Your gunners have their guns up. When the shots fire, that's when we are now looking at steady to the shot. Steady to shot is evaluated until the bird hits the ground. And that is or after the bird is shot, and then that is our steady to fall. Each of those are broken down individually as the judges are evaluating the dog in the field. So it goes pointing, steady to flush, steady to wing, steady to shot, steady to fall. There is a very good caption or picture that breaks it all down on page 25 of the AIM. There you go, on the Aims and Rules Aims and Rules book. And this gives you a very good example of where each of those elements are evaluated. So as you see the dog pointing, handler moves ahead. Once the handler is moving ahead and the dog's aware of the handler, that is our steady to flush. Bird takes wing. That's our steady to wing score. Then when the shot is fired, that's a score, and then steady to fall being the bottom portion of it. The dog at that point is expected to remain steady until given the command to retrieve. Okay, and I'm sure that's probably where we're going next, Alicia. So any questions on the steadiness sequence?
Just one.
Hold on, we got multiple people talking. Clint, go ahead.
All right. If you have to command the dog to hunt short, is it a cooperation deduction?
It can be. It can be. And again, some of these questions as you ask, without having a group of judges in the field to actually see, where we're going with it. If we have to do it multiple times, the dog keeps getting that distance out. Now we're going to look at some cooperation. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good question. Okay, I got a question in the chat from Ralph. Steady to fall. Say you were I lost it. Hold on. Say you were to train for steady to shot and the dog would break on the shot on every bird contact. How would that dog be scored in overall steadiness? So if the dog had a good point, that's a good question, Brett. If the dog had a good point, was steady to flush with no command, steady to flush would be a 4. Steady to wing, the dog didn't move when the bird took flight, that would be a 4. If the dog broke on the shot and no commands were given and the dog continued in the game, that would then be a 0 in steady to shot and steady to fall. Now, if you start throwing some commands in there, for example, you gave that command on the shot, the dog stopped, that would take that to a 3. If the dog remained through the fall, that fall score could possibly be a 4. Okay. The big thing there is if you give the command or don't give the command and the dog doesn't obey, you're going down a steadiness hole pretty quick. So great question, Brett.
I have a question.
Okay, is that Chris?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Dog's on point. Dog's tail's wagging. When it acknowledges the handler, the tail becomes staunch.
Okay. So tail wagging, hips moving can be looked at in 2 different manners. A little bit of tail wagging on excitement as the handler's approaching. I've never judged with a judge that's had an issue with that. But I know myself, I had a short hair that kind of did that. He would be so excited as he was on point. And as you would walk in, you'd see him kind of cock his head to acknowledge me walking in. And as soon as he did that, boom, he'd staunch up. So yeah, we have seen that. Now we get into a point where they may be dancing with those hind legs or hips may be rocking. That is definitely going to be looked at in the pointing score, and that's in that section is the handlers working in. So it will be a deduction in the pointing score in that sequence.
If his feet are moving.
Well, if his hips, his feet don't necessarily have to move, but if the hips are loose and rocking in that sequence, he will receive a deduction in his pointing score.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So again, this here we're looking at from the Ames book is just a breakdown of where we're at. We've kind of covered pretty much a lot of this already. So let's go ahead and go on to the next slide.
Before you go, I do have a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
When you are evaluating a point, I know that there's 2 things that as a judge you're supposed to look at. I think is the point convincing and is it intense? Okay, productive is the other.
Yeah.
How do you judge intensity? A lot of
Intensity, good question, Jeff, because nowhere on a NAVHDA utility or invitational scorecard is the word intensity listed. Convincing and productive.
Okay. So if it's not listed, but a judge gives you a 3 in pointing because he didn't think the dog was intense enough.
So more than likely that could have fell into that scenario where the dog, in the term that we use a lot is loose. Okay. Not seeing the actual sequence, it's hard to say why the judge scored it that way. But in the scenario that was asked by Chris, with those loose hips rocking or possibly the feet moving, I could see where that could come into play, but that word intensity is not listed anywhere in NAVHDA. That question actually came up a few years back at one of our seminars at the annual meeting. And there was some good discussion on it. But again, the word intensity is not listed anywhere in the Ames book in regards to pointing.
Okay, I thought I'd read it and it was.
Yeah.
Good to know. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so one of the things, Herb, I think, what have I got left? I've got training and then training resources. So really, this might be a good time, you know, depending on what else you have that you want to cover. We can talk about some training methods and maybe get some ideas for, you know, if my dog's doing X, what can I do to correct? What are some common things that you see in the field that are easily correctable, but that you still see often? Maybe talk about some of that and just kind of give some pointers on how to get through this section of the test and what kind of things to think about when you're training and that kind of thing. And then whatever else you want to include.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of go back to the beginning where we started. I'm going to hit on some of my theories behind training. Again, as I gave a disclaimer in the beginning, I am not a professional trainer. I'm an amateur trainer. I've trained my own dogs. I've worked with my NAVHDA chapter, NAVHDA family to train every dog that I've ran. You take three different trainers and you tell them the same situation, and they could give you a dozen different ways to look at and address the problem. Not all dogs will respond to the same possible method of correction for a problem. So, you know, you got to kind of look at things different. I will say that I've had some training issues in the past where I've gone to some of my mentors and, you know, hey, this is what my dog did. This is what I've done. It didn't work. What are your thoughts on correcting the problem? So I will say utilizing your resources is one of the biggest tools you have in your toolbox. Give you some of my thoughts and theories on the utility test. Duck search. I start duck search with a duck chase. I will take a young dog, let them see the ducks in the crate, get a duck out, let the dog get excited on the duck, let the dog smell the duck, you know, let the dog try to nip at the duck, whatever I can do to get that dog as excited as possible. At that point, introduction on the duck search. Then kind of what we do is we go down to the water's edge, and the first time we'll you know, have that wing clip duck, toss it out in the water, and hopefully it starts swimming away. And I let that young dog watch that duck hit the water, watch that duck swim. And a couple ways here that I've done it, I've taken the dog away and then brought him back and sent him up for the duck. And if the duck's making tracks to get away as fast as it can, I'll send the dog right at that point, because that dog's got that drive. This is one part of the test where you want that dog's drive as high as it can be, going out for the duck search. Once I get a dog who is doing good duck searches, who's covering the water in search of the game, I limit them. I don't do duck searches every week. I want that duck search to be the funnest part of that dog's day at the test. So I may go down to where I do maybe 3 duck searches in 1 week after introduction. and then go to 1 a week for a couple weeks after that, and then maybe go to every other week. Because I want that dog to still have that drive and still want it to go out, still want it to be fun. And I don't want the dog to get bored with the duck search. Because as we saw when we talked about the scoring system, that is one of the 3 elements that dog has to have a 4 on to receive a prize 1 in the utility test. That's kind of my thoughts on the duck search. I also like to make sure I go to different bodies of water. Don't train for that body of water, but train for the test. So no matter where you go, take the dog to as many different ponds or marshes as you can to get that dog doing a good, consistent duck search. Okay. Questions on duck search before we move on there? Okay. Walking at heel. Many years ago, I was just got into judging, had a novice handler. It was this handler's first time handling a dog, brought in a beautiful long-haired, a German long-haired pointer. Had never seen or evaluated one of those dogs before. And the dog tore up the field. I mean, it was amazing. The dog had a wonderful search, steadied a wing shot fall, retrieved a hand. Dog did a fabulous duck search. We got to the healing and steady by blind sequence. And the handler leashed the dog and gave the command and started through the healing stakes. And that dog went through and took out probably 8 of the gates. Just was on the other side of the gate going through, and handler got down to the blind, set the dog up, went away, fired the shots, and then the blind sequence was beautiful. The dog had 4s in everything with the exception of healing. And, was a beautiful dog, beautiful day for the handler. And the handler said, I never worked on healing. The dog healed around the house all the time and never had an issue. You've got to train healing. It's got to be something that you do in the house environment, in the kennel environment, in the yard environment, in the field environment, straight down to a body of water, away from a body of water, parallel to a body of water with ducks or geese on it, anything to give that dog an opportunity for a training session. That handler that particular day was working on a maximum score prize 1, and healing took that person out that day. And I felt very, very bad because, it was a beautiful dog. Could have possibly had an opportunity to go to an invitational with that dog, but healing took him out of a maximum score prize 1 that day. I like to start working a dog as a pup on a leash. I don't give a whole lot of commands, but I use the leash. If the dog starts pulling, I'll give a slight pop. I have used the prong collars in the past on some dogs. I had a very good training on that from Pat Lamania, who worked for Purina for many years. He was observing me doing that training one day and gave me some wonderful training tips and techniques as far as making sure that prong collar is on correctly, and it's not used to be put steady pressure. It's used to pop. If the dog starts moving ahead, a slight pop. There's not a whole lot of pressure goes with that. He did a demonstration with me. Put that prong collar around my wrist, and he popped it just as hard as you would on a dog. which again doesn't have to be that hard. You're just trying to get the dog's attention. So, you know, I'm a firm believer in a prong collar at times as a training tool. I also use my Garmin collar, a very low stimulation. Once the dog has started to, or after the dog has learned what healing means, with the training collar, very low stimulation, give the dog a little bit of slack. If the dog starts putting a little tension on the leash, I start to give the dog a little bit of correction with the collar again. Since the dog has learned the behavior, the dog learns how to turn off the stimulation by coming back to the healing position. That has improved healing, I know, in my toolbox very well, by being able to incorporate the collar with stimulation to get the dog to change behavior. But again, you've got to do healing around people. You got to do healing with gates, away from gates, to water, from water, distractions, to really make sure the dog understands what the expectation is for healing. I had a very last dog I ran. I've ran him twice in utility, and going into that, my wife always made the comment that that's the best healing dog that you've ever trained. Well, the first time he ended up with a 3 in healing in his first utility test and a 2 in the second one, because he was so excited to get to the water. And we will be working on healing moving forward this year before we test again. But it's a shame when you see healing take a dog out of a prize one. Even when you get to the invitational level, I know we saw some dogs in New Mexico this year that really had a lot of trouble with healing. So healing is an all-around obedience that there really needs to be worked on to have a successful test. Questions on healing?
Yeah, I've got one thing I wanted to, and I'm only speaking from my own experience here, but another objective to approaching heal, because as the story you had mentioned for the, individual that went into utility and got knocked out for heal, which I haven't run utility yet, signed up, but my dog was 3 years old and I'd never taught her heal. And I tried the slip lead, regular leads, the Rick Smith Wonder lead,
Right.
Nothing. I had a bunch of people at various chapter training days. Oh, I can have a dog healing in 5 minutes. I'd hand them the lead, and 3 or 4 people after that, nothing. And I don't know if he's still on here, but Chris Randall, that's on the call, I was telling him, like, I've tried all these methods. I can't make any progress. And he's like, well, is she food motivated? Like, yeah. He's like, that works on adult dogs too, not just a puppy. And every day I come home from work, I use freeze-dried beef liver, and did that every day going to the mailbox when I got home from work. And within 2 or 3 days, had her healing, where I'd spent 4 months using all the collars and the leashes and had no success. Excellent.
And Braden, that kind of goes back with what I kind of talked about there, utilizing resources, share with others what you're seeing, and others may have a different approach to that training, that method, and that worked out very beneficial to you. So that was a great share. I appreciate that. Thank you. Just remember that you can't have any of those beef livers in your pocket when you're testing.
10-4.
Believe it or not, there's been people who have tried that and thought they were going to get away with it. Okay. Okay, so walking at heel. Remaining by blind. one of the best training methods that I find with remaining by blind. And Jeff George, I know you've seen us use this many of times at our chapter training days and different training events we've been together. We always try to have somebody stand close to the blind as you, the handler, walks away to go fire your shots. If the dog moves or starts to leave the blind, that person standing there close, make the correction and give the command. And why do I say that, and why it has worked for us over the years? Well, if you think about it, when you're running a utility test, you're going to have a judge standing in that general vicinity, evaluating that dog when you walk away. So what the dog's learning there is that even though you as the handler, the master, are out of sight, whoever's nearby is going to give that correction and be able to correct that dog's undesired behavior. Another method I've used in the past that has worked well is a place board. I teach my dogs place in the house. Right now I'm down to the 2 dogs on my string, and they live in the rec room with us. And one dog has an ottoman, that's his place, and the other dog has a bed on the floor, and that's his place. And when I tell them place, they go there. So I use that same training method with a place board. The best place board I found to use, they're cheap, recyclable, and they don't weigh anything, is you take these corrugated political signs at the end of election season, and I probably got 3 or 4 of them in the bed of my truck, and they're easy to carry around with you and put down. I teach the dog place with that. So once I tell that dog to place, the dog's not expected to leave that corrugated board. So something else you can use as you're working with that gives a visual as well as a central element behind the blind that the dog can't leave that place on the remain. Steadiness by the blind, or first of all, any questions on remain by the blind before we move on to steadiness? Okay. Steadiness by the blind, a very good training technique, again, goes back to that helper. As you're up there, the gunner fires their first shot, the handler fires their shot. If you have that person who was your helper standing close by, and the dog moves, have that person work with you. That person can give a command and a correction if needed. And again, the dog's relating that whoever's close by or whoever's closest, somebody is always going to be there to give a command if needed and to correct the undesirable behavior. We've had some dogs in the past where we've actually had to use a half hitch, hooking a training rope to the collar and then a half hitch around the flank. Put a little pressure on the dog if the dog starts to move, give a little pop, a little pressure, enough that the dog knows that, hey, I'm supposed to remain here. Kind of goes back to the training tool, the same training tool that we use in the field when we're working steadiness with that half hitch. You're not putting pressure on the dog trying to roll it or anything like that. You're just having a little bit of slack in the line. If the dog starts to inch forward or move forward, the dog can then feel some pressure and knows how to turn it off by stopping. So that's a good training tool that we've used in the past with steady by the blind. You can also use that place board or woe board in that scenario as well when you're working for steady by the blind. Okay.
Just a quick question there. I'd heard that you could actually place something with your scent on it, hat, jacket, etc., at that blind location.
Yes, when you're doing the remain. So in other words, as soon as you go through the healing course, you set your dog up in the blind. You have to undo your leash. Okay. You can leave a jacket, a hat, a leash, anything there with the dog. Okay, you can't have a leash on the dog, but it can be laying in the blind next to the dog. Yes, you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. And that's specifically written out in the aims and rules book as well. It says that you have that opportunity to do that. Retrieve of duck. As we're looking at that retrieve of duck in this sequence of the test, this all goes back to your condition retrieve training. That you have a good foundation on the table before you take it to the ground, before you take it to the water. When you're getting to the point, if you're taking a dog who is not a solid retriever, has not successfully gone through condition retrieve, and you get to the retrieve of duck portion and the dog is not providing the behavior or the expectation that you expect, you can't blame that on the dog, because the dog has to have that good foundation to retrieve. I had a very good friend over the other night who kind of got me started in NAVHDA and the versatile dogs, and he looked at me and he says, even if you have a dog that is a natural retriever, would you still do conditioned retrieve? And I said, absolutely, because at no point can that dog think that a retrieve is optional. I said, now, the level of training that it will take will probably be less for a dog that has a natural retrieve. The level of stimulation required to get the dog to do the task will probably be greatly reduced. But yes, I would still take that dog through conditioned retrieve with all the retrieving expectations in a UPT utility as well as invitational testing. Okay. Search, again, search, getting your dog out. Training method, the biggest thing there is get your dog out in different environments, different fields, different types of grasses, different types, if you hunt timber or woods, different type of scenarios. Let the dog explore, let the dog go and build up that desire to cover the ground, to search objectives, but also make sure you've got an obedient dog who will whoa when needed, come when needed, to be able to handle the dog in the field. But search, we see that, the dog's got to go out, it's got to search the objectives, and it's got to find game. So the more time a dog spends in the field, the more game it finds, the better your search is going to be. As we talked about earlier, Alicia asked a question about conditioning. I'm a firm believer in conditioning so that dog can make that 30-minute run in the field, even on an 85, 90-degree day. But that dog has to be conditioned to have a good search. Okay. Steadiness. When it comes to steadiness, I use launchers, I use pigeons, I've used, as I referred to, the woe board. I use a check cord with a half hitch. I incorporate them all together to work steadiness. And when I teach steadiness, I break it down. Dog goes in on point. First thing we're going to do is we're going to work on steady to flush. And once we master that, then we work on steady to wing, the dog taking wing. And we build on it like walking up a set of stairs. You have to take it one step at a time. Or building a building, you got to have a good foundation. So I break that down to individual sessions when we're working with a young dog on steadiness. We do steady to flush. We'll do the woe board. We'll do pigeons and a launcher. And I've seen a lot of times is you progress to chuckers or quail or pheasants on the ground, you'll have to kind of step back a little bit. You might have to go back to the woe board. You might have to go back to utilizing the check cord on a half hitch, just to get that dog to understand, because you've changed the rules of the game. So don't be afraid to take a step back on steadiness and reevaluate that.
Herb?
Retrieve by drag. we didn't talk about that one very much earlier, but retrieve by drag is a test of the dog where the dog is given a command. It is expected to obedient to go out. In the utility test, it's not about the dog following the track. It's about the dog going out independently away from the handler, picking up the game and bringing it back and delivering it. The drag is all about the obedience and how the dog will perform the task away from the handler's eyes and away from the handler being able to give a correction. Again, that goes back to a good condition retrieve program. Training for the drag, I like to start drag short where the dog is in sight, and then I increase them out greater distance each time. A drag also, I don't like to do an exuberant amount of drags. I want the dog to know what the expectation is and to be able to go out and perform that task and deliver the duck back to hand. There's really no secret training method I could say on a drag. It kind of goes back to the natural ability pheasant track. Once the dog will follow a track, we should have seen that in natural ability test. And now it goes back to what you did on the table on that condition retrieve and how that dog's going to behave. Does the dog know what your expectation is to pick up that game and bring it back to you and deliver it to hand? Okay. So that pretty much gets us through the utility test. Questions on anything that we may have reviewed, or any other general questions while we're all together?
Herb?
Yes.
Okay. I just had a question going back to the launchers. In your training experience, have you ever had a dog, I don't know, for lack of a better way to put it, sour on launchers?
I've had dogs blink launchers before.
Okay.
Generally, that can go back to maybe a situation with a young pup who may have gone in and tried to scoop a bird or take a bird from a launcher. And I take that to being my fault because I should have popped that bird long before the dog ever got that close to it. So always make sure you got good batteries in both your remote and your receiver, and that you can see the position of that launcher. So as the dog gets close to it, you can get that bird airborne. Some ways we have broken that. What we started doing is just as exactly as the dog goes in. Soon as you see the initial instinct of the dog making game, pop that bird. Don't let the bird or don't let the dog get on top of that launcher to cause those problems. Okay. Some other methods, depending on the type of launcher you have, if you have a launcher that has the adjustable springs to it, sometimes that noise of the launcher going off can kind of spook a dog and sour them. You can back those springs off so they're a little softer. You still want to make sure that bird gets in the air, but you can reduce that sound effect with the dog if that's what could be causing your problem as well. So good question.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have any training issues they want to talk through, or anything they've experienced in a test? If you've done a utility test before that you want to ask questions about or get clarification?
You're not going to get any better training advice than right here, right now.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, come on now. I'm just an old hillbilly who got lucky.
Yeah, well, you've guided me through a bunch of different things, and so many of the things you talked about tonight, I can remember us doing a lot of those things.
Yeah.
And probably the one that stands out the most was having your dog in shape. I had that big old black poodle pointer that He was kind of a lazy dog, but boy, we ran his ass off over there. And when I did the invitational, we were about 45 minutes in and we were running with an LHU pointer. And I thought that pointer was going to run us in the ground. And one of the gunners stopped me and said, we're 45 minutes in and your dog is still going strong and that pointer's starting to fade. He said, I'm really impressed. So that made me feel pretty good. And I owe that to you and a whole lot of other things too. So
Very good. Thank you, Jeff.
yeah, thank you. Nobody else?
I got something up. That was a thank you from Shirley. Okay, seen that pop up here on the chat.
Yep. All right. Well, I mean, I guess if nobody else has any questions or anything to share,
I'm going to throw one final caveat out there.
please.
Be involved with your NAVHDA chapter as much as you can. If you have something and you're having trouble working your way through it, your methods aren't working, talk to some of the experienced trainers in your chapter or in your circle of friends. That can help, because at some point, most of the people you're going to be associated with have seen issues similar, and their approach on the correcting the behavior or how to train for it better could be a little different than yours, and that can help. Also, if you have an opportunity to have somebody stand back and watch you as you're training, we can all develop little things that we don't realize that we do, little cues in regards to training that carry over into a test that can be detrimental to us. So, have those folks stand back, not only help watch your dog, but watch you. I'll give you a prime example. I have a good friend who has ran many dogs in NAVHDA at all levels. And he had issues with retrieving, and he didn't even realize he was doing it. He would stand back as the dog was coming back with the duck or chuck or whatever it was on the retrieve. And he would sit there and he would tap his hand on his leg, a cross between calling the dog and giving the dog praise at the same time. And, he had some issues in his testing where he'd had to give a command and then he kept doing that with his hand that, in the scorecard now became multiple commands, but he had no idea that he was doing it. So, have people work with you, watch you, bounce ideas off your friends in your NAVHDA family. So that's one of the best words of advice I can give everybody on the call tonight.
I flipped to this slide. Do you have any additional training resources that you kind of have go-tos for books or videos?
I go to the Aims and Rules book. I use my NAVHDA chapter. Sometimes I am, how do I want to say this politically correct, a little apprehensive when you can go out and things you can look up on the internet.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes people think they are professionals and really know what they're talking about. And sometimes that can get you in trouble. Not to say that the internet is not a good tool. There are some great trainers out there, but just make sure, what you're looking at, that the people know what they're talking about.
Got it. Thank you. Well, I guess if there are no other questions, we will let everybody get back to the rest of their evening. Herb, thank you so much for doing this. Really appreciate it. This was great. A lot of good information. Happy to have you.
Can I ask one more question? Sorry.
Sure.
Yes, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. So Herb, do you have any suggestions or handling tips about, I guess placing or guiding your gunners around the field? I spent about an hour and 15 minutes in the field on my utility test this fall, due to some missed shots and strong winds and things like that. So I guess you know, just any tips you might have as far as handling, you know, the situations and things in the
You know, Joe, that's a great question. And, you know, as we go to the aims and rules book, it talks specifically about the handler guiding the gunners. Once you establish, you know, you see your dog on point, start giving instructions to those gunners. Make sure as you're walking in that they're kind of separated, one towards each side of the dog. Make sure they understand, you know, what section they're going to have to shoot. That also helps with, you know, as you're walking in, maybe that bird will wild flush in front of the dog before you even get there. You know, so they're kind of in position, but make sure they know their role and be simple with your instructions. Or you stay with me. I will tell you this, watch your gunners, that a gunner doesn't walk up next to your dog at a position you could possibly be in healing. That can lead to some bad things, that your dog may think that he's going to go into a heel. So make sure your gunners are away from your dog. Make sure, you know, one's on your left, one's on your right. They know their position and they're ready as you are to walk in to flush the bird. And make sure they're up to pace with you. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Great question.
Shirley mentioned, when we were talking about training, Shirley mentioned that when she does training with her dog, she sometimes videotapes herself so that she can watch it after the fact and see like what she can pick out. Feel free to elaborate if you want, Shirley. If not, that's fine too. But thank you for the point. That was a really good suggestion. All right. Well, oh, we got another. Yeah. Just a sign off. All right. Well, I think we're probably about ready to wrap it up. Thanks again, Herb, and we really appreciate your time. And
Thank you very much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
yeah, this was great, guys. Thanks a bunch for coming. Have a good night.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, Herb.
You're welcome, Jeff.